How's everyone doing? We hope that you are doing well on this Friday. We'll give a few minutes to let everyone come in that's coming in before we start our discussion. Just a couple of points of housekeeping. Uh, we're doing something new tonight. Usually, our broadcast only offered on Facebook, but now we are branching out just a little bit. This a particular broadcast is multi-stream now. It's also taking advantage of YouTube as a way of getting the message out. So tonight we're going to talk about something I think that needs to be spoken about. A lot of content creators have published their thoughts on what has happened, and we're going to get into a very pertinent topic tonight. But before we get into that topic, there's a couple of things I want to bring to your attention before I make the main argument of what we'll be discussing tonight. Are you familiar with what the pH balance is? Now, for the ladies in the audience, I know that you all know what it is, but the pH balance is something that is very pivotal to our survival as humans. You'll find that if you consult a chart that has to do with pH balance, there are some very interesting facts that can be found there. So let me get it up and let me show you. Even in the natural world, there is balance. As we just talked about, matter of fact, balance is necessary for our existence. You couldn't survive if water wasn't neutral. You couldn't drink it. It would be of no use to you. It would be of no use to any living thing that's on the planet. And so that balance is what keeps things going, keep things moving in a positive direction. And balance in the natural world is defined as a state of equilibrium, right? Not too bad, not too good, right in the middle. That's most effective. So now, what does that have to do with human beings and their relationships? Well, as far as the human context is concerned, balance means mental steadiness or emotional stability. Mental steadiness or emotional stability. Now, isn't that something? If an individual is mentally stable, right? He's steady. And that means that that individual is not easily shaken. It takes a lot to throw him off balance, right? He mentally, he is at equilibrium. And so he's ready, I would say, for anything that would come his way. And then even if difficulties do come his way, what happens is he's easy to adjust to those circumstances. He's easy to cope with them, right? So now, what are a few things that could throw a person off balance? I have a little list here I'd like to share with you. These are just a couple of things, okay? It's not exhaustive, it's just a few. But there's one on this particular list that's going to lead us right into our discussion for this evening. Childhood abuse, trauma, or neglect. Social isolation or loneliness. Experiencing discrimination and stigma. Social disadvantage, poverty, or debt. And then the last one, bereavement, losing someone close to you. So I guess I've given it away now, haven't I? Uh, the particular item that we're going to be discussing tonight is Sha'Carri Richardson and the drama that has unfolded because of a failed drug test. Now, this particular live show is not aimed at discrediting Sha'Carri. Miss Richardson is a stellar athlete, but now there was some things that happened during the course of the week that became known, and it put things into perspective for me. I don't know if it did for you, but it put it in perspective for me. So now let's keep going, then we'll come back to that, okay? So now, after one of these things has happened to a person and they have lost their balance, then how do they go about regaining their balance? How do they go about doing that? Well, one major thing that a person can do is look into coping mechanisms, okay? Coping mechanisms. Because here's the thing, when situations come upon you, right, that throw you off balance, usually what happens is there is an accumulation of stress. Stress begins to build up and up and up and up and up, and before you know it, you're totally off balance, and you don't know how you got there, right? So now, coping is a way of taking on stress in a positive way and moving accordingly, adjusting, right? Putting things in different places so that you can maneuver around the difficulty that you're having and still maintain your mental stability. So I guess that self-care is also a topic that we're going to interject into this conversation tonight because it's important. Now, upon doing a little research, I ran into an article from the Cleveland Clinic. It's entitled Stress, Coping with Life Stressors. Now, one of the things that it mentioned about coping, as we mentioned, is adjusting or tolerating negative events so that you can keep your emotional stability. So now this particular tolerance that we're talking about is not something that's passive, it's active. And so you're working to build up a tolerance to the situation that's continually causing you stress. Yes, you're doing your best to cope with it, right? So now stress comes about when there are changes, unexpected changes that hits a person. We just named a few of them, right? And so what happens is it causes a person to have to adapt quickly. And if there are too many events that cause stress that hit a person at one time, then they feel overwhelmed. And when they feel overwhelmed, it's difficult to see a way out of the difficulty that they're having to deal with. So how do they cope? Well, the article mentioned that there are a couple of things that a person could do, right? I'll share a few of them with you. And I'll put the article in the description down below so you can make reference to it. One of the first things that it mentions is ask others to help or assist you, right? The next one is to take responsibility for the situation, engage in problem solving, maintain emotionally supportive relationships, maintain emotional composure, or express your distressing emotions. I think we have a couple more. Directly attempt to change the source of stress, distance yourself from the source of stress, or view this particular problem through a religious perspective. So now those are ways of coping with stress, coping mechanisms, if you will. Now, why is that important? Why is it important for an individual to know how to cope? Why is it important for an individual to know that there are some strategies that they can employ if things begin to hit them one after another so that they can maintain their emotional stability? They can maintain their own physical health, their emotional health, and all of the other aspects of their life that make it enjoyable. There are strategies for that. There are mechanisms that you can put in place to help you with that. But now, why is that important? Why are we harping on that particular line of reasoning, that rationale? Because if a person remains imbalanced too long, what can happen is that these negative attitudes, these feelings, this notion that you're trapped and that you can't get free, they can create chronic stress. And so you begin to feel more and more and more overwhelmed all of the time. And you really can't escape then. And then it upsets the balance of hormones in your body. And so the chemicals that are required for you to be happy, for you to have a content state, uh, see, those things are absent. And the chemicals that are in your body, they can work to harm your immune system. So do you see how it's a domino effect, and it can be cataclysmic. So you're stressed about a certain situation, and then you don't employ the proper coping mechanisms, and then that adds to your stress. And then there are things that continue to hit you one after the other, and before you know it, your immune system has been suppressed, and now you're sick. One of the main things that shows up a lot of times as a manifestation of this is individuals coming down with a cold. Your immune system has been thrown off balance, and so it can't fight off the diseases, the bacteria, the things that will harm your body. So that's one reason why maintaining your balance and coping is so important. But now, what about an individual who employs these coping mechanisms, these skills? What about those individuals? Well, it mentions there that they'll have better well-being, psychologically especially. They'll have better cardiovascular health, and then they'll be at a reduced rate for heart disease. So now that's important now. That's important because heart disease is one of the number one things that kills individuals in our community. Heart disease, cardiovascular disease, things of that sort. So just being able to cope successfully with problems that hit you, they can put you in a better state of mind, and they can put your health in a more positive place also. So now, why did I go over all that? Why am I focusing on balance and coping mechanisms? I want to show you something. Let's take a look at it, okay?
Just honestly, I want to take responsibility for my actions. I know what I did. I know what I'm supposed to do. No, I'm allowed not to do, and I still made that decision. But not making an excuse or looking for any empathy in my case, but just however being in that position of my life, finding out something like that, something that I would say is probably one of the biggest things that have impacted me positively and negatively in my life when it comes to dealing with the relationship I have with my mother. So that definitely was a very heavy topic on me, and people don't understand what it's like to have to, or people do. We all have our different struggles. We all have our different things we deal with. But to put on a face, to have to go in front of the world and put on a face and hide my pain. Like, I don't know, who are you, or who am I to tell you how to cope when you're dealing with a pain, or you're dealing with a struggle that you've never experienced before, or that you've never thought you would have to deal with. Like, who am I to tell you how to cope? Who am I to tell you that you're wrong for hurting?
All right, so now that particular video is one that I think speaks to a larger issue, not just in my community, but all over the world. This is an issue. Uh, Ms. Richardson was hit with a devastating challenge. She found out that her biological mother had passed, and having lost a biological parent myself, I understand the difficulties that she is going through. I can empathize with her, even though she asked us not to. I certainly can, because losing a parent is something that no child ever wants to experience, even though it is the reality of life in general. We lose ones that we love. But now, if you are looking at just that segment, and I picked that segment out because I think it's most telling. Ms. Richardson is here making a statement in an attempt to explain, not to justify, but to explain the reason why she did the things that she did. And at the beginning of that explanation, I could see some sincerity. I can. And I understand that as individuals, we all make mistakes. Like she mentioned, no one is perfect. And the perfect people that are judging her, I'm sure that there's some things that you as individuals wish you could take back too. But now let's get into uh, the meat of our situation here. These difficult situations that come as trauma, uh, are we handling these situations the way that we need to? Or are we off balance when it comes to things like this? Hear me out. In this particular situation, the loss of a parent, as we mentioned, is one of the things that can throw you off balance. It's traumatizing. That person that has always been there is no longer there to call. They're no longer there to share your good days with. They're no longer there to console you on the days that you wish had went better. They're not there anymore. And so there is a void that's left because this person has passed away. But now, because this is a negative situation, it's a painful situation. Should we add more pain to the situation? You already have a difficult situation, so now you're going to add more difficulty to it. Let me be frank with what I'm saying. Uh, that was not the way to handle the trauma that she was experiencing. That's never the way for anyone to handle this particular trauma. And as she went on with her explanation, it came out. The point that I was looking for, it came out. She asked the question, who am I to judge? Now, of course, that's not what we're doing, but what we are saying is that looking at it a little bit closer, uh, in a lot of cases, destructive behavior is what's used as a coping mechanism. You see, there are a good coping mechanism and there are bad. And so in this particular instance, what would you classify what she did? Would it be a good coping mechanism or a bad one? Now, regardless of how you feel about the effects of marijuana and using marijuana, there is a clear precedent that she had been presented with. She understood that as stellar as an athlete as she was, that she was going to be under increased scrutiny. People were going to be looking at her closely. They were going to be following what she was doing. And as a result, anything that she did that was unbecoming would be public knowledge. And so that's what happened. But now, once again, was this a good coping mechanism? Or was it a mechanism that simply satisfied her at the present, but will produce problems in the future? Was it one of those things? Well, the outcome of it tells us which one it was. Because even though she felt some comfort from this particular instance, uh, what she did, indulging in marijuana, she felt some comfort in that particular instance. But then in the long run, can you see how it affected her? And there are so many people in our society, especially in certain areas of life, that do this very same thing. They take bad coping mechanisms to try to solve their difficulties, to try to deal with stress. And then they wonder why the stress never goes away. They wonder why they're never able to successfully deal with the difficulties that they face because they continue to employ coping mechanisms that are self-destructive. Regardless of what you think, regardless of what anyone says, indulging in drugs and alcohol are never successful coping mechanisms. They never are. They never will be. The only thing you're doing is taking one problem and you're tacking another one on top of it. That's all you're doing. So now, if I'm going to say that that was a bad coping mechanism, right? If I'm going to say that there should have been something else that she could have employed, I have to also at the same time, I have to believe that the case with her is that maybe she was never taught these positive coping mechanisms. Maybe she was never taught to cope with things successfully. Maybe in her particular neighborhood and her upbringing, the way that individuals coped with difficulties that they had was by just what we mentioned, drugs and alcohol. There's a prevalence of that type of behavior in every community. Every community. I don't care what skin color you are. I don't care what area of the world you come from. There are individuals in your part of the world that choose to cope with their life with these destructive coping mechanisms. And it has to stop because the things that we see, the people that are around us, they are affected by the way that we cope with our difficulties. Because now think about this. Uh, the coping mechanism that Shikari chose to employ, right? Did it only affect her? On the out, on the surface level, some would say, yeah, she's the only one that was affected by this. Nobody else was affected because nobody else was running. And to a certain degree, I can see your point. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. Because you think about her family members. Think about the college that she comes from. Think about her friends. Think about those who look up to her. Think about the community that she comes from who rallied behind her when the difficulties came up on her. Think about all those people. And think about what happened when the news broke that she would not be able to use this talent that we know her to be the best at. I'm already saying it. I believe she would have been the fastest woman on the planet. I really do. But see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. In being a balanced individual and being someone that looks at things and takes them for what they are, not for what I want them to be, I understand that there are responsibilities that come with what I do. I understand that there are things that are challenges that I have to meet. And this was one of them. Now, am I sad that she's not going to be able to run? Absolutely. But is this something that's extraordinary? Is this something that is fueled by racism or any other thing like that? Some people will say, yeah, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because it's simple. As we mentioned before, she knew that she was going to be under a magnifying glass. And if she didn't know it, someone in her circle around her should have told her that. They should have informed her that she was going to be under a magnifying glass. And so they were going to be watching her closely. So whatever it was she chose to do, she needed to make sure that it was above board. I need to make sure that what I do, even as she said in the interview, she had to put on the face. She had to put on the face. And sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it is. There are instances where a person has to endure while presenting positivity when really deep down inside there's pain, there's hurt, there's difficulty. Right? But now there again, herein lies the positive coping mechanisms. If you're not taught how to or deal with things in a constructive way, this is what you'll do. Now, this is a lesson that I guarantee you she learned from. I guarantee you that next year there won't be anybody on the track. They put their track shoes on that'll be faster than she is. Because now, on top of the things that she has to deal with, she has the determination now in her mind. If you watch the rest of the interview, she has the determination in her mind now to be the best regardless of what happens. She's going to stick to the rules. She's not going to let anything prevent her from being the best version of herself. And this is what positive coping mechanisms can do. You're able to take the difficulties, the trauma that you have. You're able to deal with those things, and you're still able to perform at your maximum. And I think that a lot of individuals fall short in this particular category. I have myself at times. When difficulties hit, as she mentioned, sometimes you resort to things that you never thought you would. But at the same time, we have to be accountable for what we choose to do. So if you put yourself in the habit of developing these coping mechanisms when there are difficulties in life that are small, when the larger things hit you, you can employ those same coping mechanisms and still be successful. You can do it. Now, I'm not going to get up in an uproar about the fact that she can't run. I'll let you do that if that's what you want to do. But what I am saying is that accountability requires that whatever I do as a grown-up, I need to be ready to receive the consequences. I need to be ready to reap what I sow. And I think in this case, that's exactly what happened. So now, as we mentioned, being off balance is something that really needs to be looked at. It needs to be a personal self-examination. The way that I interact with individuals around me can tell me whether or not I'm off balance or not. Look at the way you deal with your spouse. Look at the way you deal with family members. Look at the way you deal with friends. Look at the way that you deal with individuals who are in authority over you. That would tell you if you're off balance. It'll tell you. Because a lot of times what individuals do is they have this notion that either they're going to be for themselves, or they have the notion that they are going to be individuals who only care about things that pertain to them. If that's your point of view, if something has happened to you that traumatized you to the point where the only concern you have is for yourself, you are off balance. You're off balance. And so now we're going away from Shakari just a little bit, from Ms. Richardson. We're going away from her a little bit because I think this needs to be said. You hear so many creators on YouTube talking about things that only relate to themselves. They could care less about the world around them. They could care less about the example that they set. They are not concerned. You cannot be a balanced individual and hold on to those kind of notions in your mind. As we mentioned, water is sitting at 7. It's neutral. The human body is neutral and just a little bit positive. So you see that it's necessary for us as individuals to adopt that positive mindset. And the way that we can continue to have that positive mindset is if we develop coping mechanisms. So when things hit us, we're not thrown off balance. We take the thing that comes to us, we deal with it, and we keep moving. That's the way I think we should handle difficulties. Now, I wish Miss Richardson well. I hope that this was a learning experience for her. I hope that it was a learning experience for everyone. Because when there are situations where rules are in place, many times it's just necessary to just go by the rules. Just go by what's stated. And then if you go by the rules, who is to say that in the future you won't be instrumental in changing the way that things are set up? You'll never know if you don't go about the business of doing things the way that they should be. This was our first run on YouTube, and it won't be our last now. Maybe next week we can get some panelists to come in and weigh in on some issues that we face, but we are absolutely thankful for everyone that tuned in, everyone that could sit down with me and hear my discussion. If you don't take anything away from what I said, please take away the notion that you need to be balanced in your approach to everything. Balanced in the way you deal with difficulties that hit you, balanced in the way you deal with your family, your friends, and even those that are in authority over you. Balance is what will help you be productive. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Be easy.